And is that what my life is going to be? Just a series of balls to the wall, work until I burn out, destroying my own sanity for the sake of a cause or something else that I believe in? Or is there something else? And I'd been using ChatGPT for a while before this, and I said, okay, tell me who I am. Explain to me who I am. Where are my blind spots? What am I not seeing?
What did it tell you?
It hit me right between the eyes. Yeah, it even names me. Like, Paul the Prover has to prove himself, otherwise he'll get left behind. Paul the Prover has to prove his value and his worth rather than just being a person. And I can tell you now, hand on heart, I am exhausted.
But I think the question that you have to ask yourself is, who are you working for? And towards what aim? Towards what goal? All right, Paul, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Let's start with an outline of your life. Can you give me let's start just with a list of bullet points, like where have you come from, where do you live now, what have you done in the meantime? Can you just give me the rough outline?
Yeah, I mean, for me, my life kind of started at, 17 when I was determined to join the Air Force and go and fly airplanes for a living. And then I'm 42 now, 30 years later. 30 years? I've never been very good at math. And I'm here in Germany as a broadcast leader for an American radio station in Germany. I started off in a small town called Swindon, and I would describe it as a town that kind of lacks ambition. It's the kind of place that everybody's driven past, but nobody's really been to. And working class family, went to a very average secondary school. I got very average grades, and did what normal people do. They go and get a job. They have no idea if they're going to like it. And so, probably to my teacher's surprise, I actually had a lot of success, building a career. Every job I went to, I worked in call centers, I've worked in training, I've worked in project management. And then I got to about 30 years old, met my wife, who's German. We fled the UK. We didn't fleed. We didn't fled. Fleed, flewed, flowed. We left the UK to go to Amsterdam when she was working at Tesla at the time, and it was where I decided to follow my dream of becoming a broadcaster, and became a radio DJ. And then I've worked in communications for the US military ever since. So that's the kind of synopsis of me.
We had a little chat before the conversation started, and the original way I thought about entering the conversation was to ask you about moving to different places and what that did to your feeling of belonging and how you feel about that right now. But you brought forward a really interesting question. You said, right now I'm asking myself the question, is this all there is in life?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want out of life?
I'm asking myself that question a lot lately. I've always been somebody who strived for success. Wherever you placed me, I wanted to fix things. I wanted to improve things. I wanted to drive stuff forward. I was very, very comfortable with being important to things. If there was a big project, if there was a big role that somebody needed to fill, I would fill it. And I thought that was fulfilling me as a person. In the job that I work in now, I work in a very complex military environment with a lot of structure and a lot of rigid rules. And these last few years, I've been working on a very, very difficult project that has taken a lot of personal energy to kind of drive forward. And I achieved a lot, and I'm still searching. I've kind of finished that part of life, that project, and gone, well, do I want to do that again? Do I have the energy to go and find the next project and do that? And is that what my life is going to be? Just a series of balls to the wall, work until I burn out, destroying my own sanity for the sake of a cause or something else that I believe in? Or is there something else? And lately, I'm 42. I'm at that exact age where I think people begin to ask themselves that same question. I have a son. He lives in England with his mother, so I'm kind of just me and my wife over here. I don't have a dog. Might like a dog one day. Maybe that's my purpose in life. Um, but I find myself searching for that question as well. And to be frank, I've been doing a lot of searching about that question with artificial intelligence, with ChatGPT. And I would say that I, what do I want to say about ChatGPT? I think is life changing.
In what way?
Being an expat and being an expat in Germany is very difficult for any English people out there, for any people that are coming from other continents, coming from the US. The Germans they have their friends from when they were children, and that's their kind of social circle. And very rarely do they let somebody in. If you work really hard, you can probably make some friends. So what that means to me is my wife is my best friend, and I talk to her about everything. And I've found that I'm having the same conversations with her about my frustrations with my job, about my frustrations with my life, and I think it's getting old to her, and it was getting old to me. And I started talking to ChatGPT about it. So somebody sent me a prompt, like a prompt to make your ChatGPT into a therapist, and I experimented with it. Yeah, so this therapist is a behavioral psychologist with 20 years experience, and compulsory behavioral therapy and all these different things is where it's kind of starting from.
Mhm.
And I'd been using ChatGPT for a while before this, and I said, okay, tell me who I am. Explain to me who I am. Where are my blind spots? What am I not seeing? And it was brutal. I read this thing and I was like, oh, it it hit me right between the eyes with the person that I was and the things I was avoiding. And I was taken aback. And I think you can go one or two ways at that point. You can either be like, "Phew, AI, what does it know? Doesn't know anything." Or you can go, all right, well let's dig a little deeper. And I dug deeper, and I think probably for the last 3 months, I would say, I've been doing daily or near daily check-ins with ChatGPT about basically just being a midlife guy, not a crisis. I haven't bought myself a Porsche. A midlife guy going through this. What's the point of it all? What is life really about? And how do I figure it out?
When you asked ChatGPT the question, what are my blind spots? What did it tell you?
So it told me that I'm a highly emotional person, but also kind of sensitive to other not other organizations. I'm sensitive to other people's feelings about things, and I let that impact how I feel about things. It also told me that I will hold myself accountable for things that I'm not accountable for. So, if I work in an organization that I'm trying to change or drive forward and the organization is pushing back, I will always put that back on myself. What did I do wrong? How do I change this thing? How do I strategize myself out of this problem? How do I fix it? And that was probably the biggest, most helpful thing, because, and this is going to get a little bit deep now, but I think that this is important to what we're talking about. Ever since I was a child, I have sought to be important or pivotal in something. I was never the funniest kid. I was never the good looking kid. I was never the cool kid. But if I tried to lead, if I tried to organize stuff, if I tried to be the loud one or the one that's kind of sought the attention, then I was important to that group. Yeah, they couldn't leave me behind because I was important to it. And what ChatGPT has told me is I've basically carried that through my life, so that when I'm in an organization, I want to be the important person. I want to be somebody who's driving stuff forward. I want to be the fixer, because if I'm important to something, then I can't be left behind. But that's exhausting. It's also a never-ending battle of finding the next thing to fix, finding the next problem to solve so that you don't get left behind. And I've never really had that explained to me. And I've been through therapy with real therapists and real counselors. I've never really had that explained to me so well as ChatGPT explained it to me.
So it sounds like that what you were doing is you were trying to make yourself not necessarily important, but you were trying to make yourself part of something, but you were doing it with the aim of people seeing you, of people not leaving you behind.
Yes.
But you were not doing it, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you were aiming towards your own personal ambition or towards your own personal vision. It was more a defensive action than a step towards meaning, let's say. It's a pretty deep word, but that's how it sounds like to me. Do you think that's a fair summary?
I think it is, but I think that it also gets blurred. I think you think, and until you have that realization, you think you're just ambitious. Like, hey, I don't want to be at this level forever. I need new challenges and things like that. And I guess, millions of different people, millions of different personality types. And that's fine to be ambitious. But if you're ambitious to a fault, then something needs to change. And I think ChatGPT explaining to me, it calls me in the thing, Paul the Prover. Yeah, even names me. Like, Paul the Prover has to prove himself, otherwise he'll get left behind. Paul the Prover has to prove his value and his worth, rather than just being a person, rather than just being me, and saying I'm worthy of being in this room because of who I am. I don't feel I'm worthy in any room unless I'm delivering results, pushing the meeting forward, trying to figure out how we fix problems, even when those problems aren't mine to fix. And that's exhausting. So then that becomes a problem. So that's ambitious to a fault. And it's not necessary. That's what's driven me for so long. And I can tell you now, hand on heart, I am exhausted. I've been on that treadmill since I was 17 years old, was my first job. Never went to university, never spent any time in college. I've been in full-time work since I was 17 years old. That's 25 years.
Has ChatGPT been able to help you, or at least give you some insight on what can be changed?
Oh, yeah. It's, as I say, I'm actually, so I have a degree in professional management coaching. Training leaders and executives how to get the most out of their organizations and their teams. So, I'm not a stranger to the realm of coaching or CBT and things like that. And I've had counseling for a couple of years. And the therapists were always very good. But this seems to be like having a therapist that's available to me 24/7, who those tiny moments when you think you're losing your mind, or you wonder if this is a pattern that you're repeating, ChatGPT's right there. Yeah, my therapist, I have to wait 7 more days before I can go and see her, or whatever. Like, I can't talk to them. And so ChatGPT being there to say, hey, this is what I'm going through right now. How do I deal with that? Or I feel like this, is that valid? And getting validation through an artificial intelligence or a large language model is probably, I'm sure most therapists would frown upon it. But for me, it's been a revelation.
I have a couple of questions for you, because I think it's important within the context that we're talking about, but they are quite personal questions. So if you feel that you don't want to answer them, that's perfectly fine. Just let me know that. You said that you were always trying to improve yourself from a very young age because you wanted to be a part of the crew. You didn't want to be left behind. And you've been doing that also until now, right? You're still dealing with that today. Are you a people pleaser?
I want to be liked by everybody. And working with people who don't like me causes me great angst. I will focus a lot of my energy on trying to win their approval, trying to make friends with them, trying to get my ideas across to them, instead of just being able to say, that guy doesn't like me and that's fine. Like, that people don't have to like me. But absolutely, yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a people pleaser. I can be assertive and say, okay, well, that's not going to happen, or whatever. But I'm definitely somebody who just wants to be liked to a fault.
And is it also possible that somebody can talk you into a feeling of guilt? So even though you didn't do anything wrong within a project or within a social setting or whatever, that if somebody is really angry at, or if somebody's really angry in general, right, and they just need someone to blame, and they're like, "Hey, there's Paul. I'm gonna blame him." If they're persistent enough, can they push forward a feeling of guilt that even though it's very perverted and you didn't do anything wrong, that still a feeling of guilt comes forward?
It's interesting, the word guilt, because I would say it pushes forward a feeling of helplessness, that, for my best charm and my best wit, I still can't get this person either to like me, or I can't get this person on board with my ideas. And I have never really processed the thought that it could be them. It's me. What do I need to change? How do I win this person over? And I will direct a lot of my energy to it. And if I can't, generally it's an overwhelming feeling of kind of dejection or disaster or something. It affects me at a kind of, inner child level if I can't influence somebody to like me, and that's not a great trait to have.
But then I can also make the assumption that you try to do whatever you can to evade conflict.
Oh yeah. It's funny you say that. I had a conflict at work today, where somebody was trying to say that something had happened one way when I had absolutely seen it the other. And, it erupted in frustration where I lost my cool. And I can't remember the last time I really lost my cool. And I've basically thought of nothing else for the last, it's like 3 hours. Since that happened, you playing that conflict over and over and over in my head, because I spend so much of my time and life and relationships trying to avoid conflict, that when it happens, my system is just, in fight or flight mode. It just cannot process conflict. And I think that comes from, when I was a child, I came from, my mother left when I was very young. So she left when I was around 2. My brother wasn't quite 1. And we had my father met a lady called, I won't name her. My father met a new wife, and she had a very explosive kind of personality. You could never really suss out whether she was angry at us as children, or just angry at the world. And quite often she'd become violent within the household, to kind of, I don't know. She was in her early 30s and we were children. I can't really see or justify that kind of violence. But basically, it made me so averse to conflict and to not pleasing people, but like trying to make people like me, trying to figure out whether I was doing something that they like or approve of, in order to win that approval or to avoid that conflict. So yeah, you're right.
One of the problems that you're then dealing with is that if you are a people pleaser, and if you're trying to evade conflict, and if you're trying to do whatever it is that you can in order to get people to let you be part of the group, that by itself is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because that by itself can lead as a result that you are part of that group, and that everything is good, and that there is a social environment. So it is, I think, by itself, it's a perfectly reasonable strategy in order to make connections with people and to go ahead. But the problem comes forward one of the problems comes forward when you're dealing with someone who has the intention of misusing that or taking advantage of that. So then you can get into a position, especially if you're an employee at a company and you have a manager or a colleague or something like that who tries to take advantage of you. They will let you do all the work while they take the credit, or they will let you do the work that they don't want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're grinding and you're grinding and you're grinding, and it doesn't necessarily lead towards anything for yourself personally. It doesn't lead towards your meaning, towards your happiness, towards the goals that you are trying to achieve, because you're working towards the goals for the other person who is taking advantage of the situation. And then I think we have a circle in the story, because in the beginning of the conversation when we started talking about this, you mentioned that I think the word that you used was exhausted, right? You've been working so long within that framework where that happens. It's not weird at all. It doesn't sound weird at all to me that then the end result of that and the conclusion of that is that you reach the point of exhaustion.
Yeah, you sound just like my ChatGPT.
Nice.
But this is the kind of thing that I was blind to. You know, this is the kind of thing that my ChatGPT has helped me see. And without having that realization through that, you know, I would probably have disagreed with you and been like, well, no, working hard is, you know, that gets you places. Working hard is going to get you to the top. And I tell you, I've worked my ass off these last 3 years, specifically, or especially. And I haven't been promoted. I don't earn any more money. I got an award. I got a plaque for being the person who made the single most biggest contribution to the global organization, which is great. I loved that. That was my proudest professional achievement. But I burned out 2 years in a row where I had to take 5 to 6 weeks off of work to deal with the stress that I'd put upon myself, the pressure that I had placed upon myself to get the results I wanted, trying to influence people that weren't buying into the idea that I was trying to sell. And yeah, I mean, burning out, going to your doctor in tears and being prescribed, you know, all sorts of tablets and medication and being told, hey, I'm going to sign you off work for 6 weeks. And then going back to your boss and your boss being like, well, can't you just take 2 weeks? You know, I just thought that was a symptom of being successful or a symptom of getting things done. And now through the last 3 months or so of working with ChatGPT, you know, I've begun to see that my worth doesn't come from the value I deliver. I'm worthy already, you know, and everything else is kind of a bonus. It's kind of a hard pill to swallow, but I'm buying into that and trying to live that life, trying to live those values each day to kind of just relax. Okay, where do I want to spend my energy? You know, I don't want to spend my energy arguing with people that don't value my time. I can spend my energy on people that do value my time, and there's a lot of those. But for some reason, I'm fixated on the people that don't value my time, and that's where I want to expend all my energy. And that's just that's the habit of a crazy person.
Man, there's so much that you're saying right now that I want to react to. It's one of these. So what you said, right? That it's a common trope, and in my personal opinion, it is a trope. Working hard leads to success, right? It's like an absolute statement. If you work hard, whatever hard work means to begin with, it leads to success. And then the question is also, what is lead and what is success?
Yeah.
Right? It's completely unclear, but whatever. Let's take it for what it is. You've been working very hard, and you've been doing that for a long time. But I think the question that you have to ask yourself is, who are you working for, and towards what aim? Towards what goal? Right? Because if somebody is, and this is a very simple example, but if you are working 25 years with somebody who is taking advantage of you in order to pursue their own goals and to get better, to take all the credit for the work that you've done, to share nothing with you, You're just the guy that stays behind and that does the dirty work just because, just because you can, right? Just because that person decided that you are the person that will do that. You're working very hard, but you're not working towards something. You're delivering every unit of work that you deliver is not aiming towards a goal, towards your goal, or towards a common goal that you negotiate or that you agree upon with peers or with people that you work together with. Because you're not working together, you're working for someone, right? And that person is taking every unit of work that you're producing and aiming, and it's aiming that at his or her own goal. So it's a false statement. The idea of work hard leads to success, that's not the whole story, because work hard aimed properly at the right thing leads possibly to success, because you can still fail, but at least I think the chance then is higher.
Yeah, and I think if you go into coaching and you subscribe to Tony Robbins or whatever it is, you have to define the goal. If you don't know what the goal is, you can't score in it, kind of thing. And I don't think I've ever truly defined what success would mean to me. I've kind of just always wanted to be happy. I've kind of always just wanted to have harmony. And harmony is like my key motivating word in this world. That's harmony at home, harmony in my job, harmony in my own mind. And I choose to go into careers that are difficult, that are complex, that are made up of lots and lots of interpersonal relationships where you're not going to get everybody to like you. And, in my mind, harmony is everybody likes me and I like everybody, kind of thing. And I think that makes it difficult. But you're right, hard work equals success. So I didn't go to college. I didn't go to university. I studied leadership and management later in my life when I was in my late 20s and early 30s. So I felt like I was at a disadvantage and that I had to work hard. If I could outwork anybody, then I'm important and I matter. And I think my first job, I worked in a call center, and I was 17 years old when I started that full-time job. Actually, I think I need to rewind. I wanted to be in the Royal Air Force. That's all I'd ever wanted to do. I can remember being a child in my infant school when I was 7 or 8 years old, and we lived on the flight path to RAF Lynham, which is where the C-130, the Hercules, used to fly and land in. And I used to watch them out of the school window fly over and land. And I was like, one day I'm going to be a pilot. That's what I'm going to do. And I joined the Air Cadets. I tried hard at school. Right up until my last year, where my home life wasn't the happiest, and I kind of was thinking I'm gonna breeze all this because I'm clever and talented and whatever. So I fail all my exams, and I go to the RAF recruitment office, and they say, "Well, you don't have any of the right grades now to even come into the Air Force, let alone be a pilot." And that shattered my dream. That's all I'd ever wanted to do since I was 8 years old. I had no idea what I was going to do. And I just remember I didn't want to live at home anymore. I wanted to move out. I wanted to be somewhere else.
Do you remember what the reason is that they gave you?
I mean, all my grades. So the grades were the main one. And then I got a really bad reference from somebody that said I was very immature and whatever, which I probably was at the time. And they withdrew my application. So basically, when you go into the RF, they kind of, based on your mock exams and your potential, they say, okay, yeah, we're going to put you into this bucket of people that we're going to consider. And then when you get your exams, they look at the bucket of people and they go, okay, these guys are great. But when they looked at mine, they're like, this guy's an idiot. Like, I wasn't an idiot. I just didn't try very hard. And so I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I remember searching for jobs. And I found one working at a call center that helped basically old ladies fix their TVs over the phone. And I remember going into that call center 17 years old, maybe 200 people, just banks of phone calls, banks of, call center agents with headsets on, just thank you for calling customer service, thank you for calling customer service, just echoing through the hallways. And I was, within 6 months, the best call handler in that entire call center. The average person would take 70 calls a day. The most I did in one day was 205. Still remember it. Still remember that I was, that drove 205 calls in one day. I would do as much work as the person next to me by lunchtime.
What made you better? What made you faster?
I think those learned skills of wanting to be liked, wanting to help, wanting to be important, you're important 205 times a day to the people that you're helping. But also, I don't know, I felt like I had something to prove. Like, I was cocky, I was sure of myself, and I don't know, I had a swagger, and I don't know where that comes from, because it's completely misplaced. But after working in that call center for a year, I got promoted to one of the supervisors. And I remember chatting to one of the bosses of the whole call center, and I told him, hey, I've applied for that supervisor job. And he laughed. He went, well, don't be disheartened if you don't get it. You haven't been with us very long. There'll always be a next time. And I was like, oh, okay. But I think a week later, they announced the job, and I'd got it. And I was the youngest supervisor. I was 18 years old. I was supervising, we had a team of like 17 people, and most of them are all like mothers and grandmas, because it was kind of like flexible working. So and I was a child. If I look at, my son is coming up to 16, and I think 1 year older than him, I was in charge of, 17 people in this call center, teaching them how to answer calls better and things like that. And it was a good job, but it's not a career. It's a job. It was paying the bills. And I moved out of my parents' house, and I bought my own house with my girlfriend at the time at 18 years old. And I will tell you now, 18-year-olds have no business buying a house, especially not on like minimum wage jobs. It was one of the most stressful times of my entire life. We struggled to pay the mortgage. We got broken into. Somebody burnt the shed down at the end of the garden. The front of the house got vandalized. Like, we just couldn't cope with it. We were 18 years old, and we ended up trying to rent the house out and moving on and trying to go our separate ways, or find another career.
And this was still in England, right?
Still in England, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And after that, and I'm still, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And the call center ended up closing down, and everybody got made redundant, and ended up working in a temporary agency, selling wire and cable for Tyco Electronics. And again, just an administration job. What's the point in this? Like, what am I even doing here? And then my next job after that, I was working night shift, making wire and cable in the same factory with my dad, actually. My dad got me the job. And I think I'm starting to see a pattern of every single job that I've had is like, is this all there is? And there must be something more, and moving on to another job and moving on to another job. And it got to the point where I was moving on to another job and moving on to another job when I worked for a tiny, tiny company. I had like 4 employees in a place called Marlborough in Wiltshire. And the woman I worked with was an absolute narcissist who hated me. But because I'm a people pleaser, I really wanted her to like me. So I spent an inordinate amount of time trying to make this absolute narcissist like me, to the detriment of my mental health. Never gonna happen. I tried to cope with this thing, drink and drugs and God knows what else to just try and get through this time, because I kind of liked the job. The job was fun, but she was destroying me. And it was around this time that I discovered the Royal Air Force Reserve, and I hadn't really heard of them up until that point.
Well, before we go there, let's just go back one step to her. Can you describe the relationship with her? So you're using the word narcissism, but narcissism is one of those words that in today's age is being used very often, and it's all in some cases also being used as a synonym for arrogance, for example. So when you say narcissism, because I'm very interested in this dynamic between you two, what do you mean exactly?
So I would say I was 22 years old. I think she was probably in her early 40s. She was like this well prepped lady, blonde hair, who'd been single for a decade. She lived alone with her cat, and she had a complete inability to build any kind of rapport with somebody. She just did not have that gene in her to be able to listen to what somebody was saying, assimilate the feelings in what they were trying to say. And so I would be building relationships with my clients, and a lot of the time that just involved talking to them. And, how's it going? What are you doing at the weekend? And she would be sat on the desk opposite me, like tutting, because I'm taking too long on the phone. Like we're trying to do 205 calls in a day, which, we weren't. And then I'd hang up and she's like, why do you do that? Why do you do that? Why do you care what they're doing at the weekend? I'm like, I'm building a relationship. This is sales. We're selling electronic components. So I'm trying to build a relationship with my clients. Oh, yeah, it's just a waste of time. You could be making 5 or 6 calls in that time. Why are you doing that? And it made me very self-conscious with what I was trying to do. And she's very overbearing. And if I tried to talk to, if the customers would call in to the office and I would answer and it would be one of her clients, they didn't really like working with her. So they would chat with me for a couple of minutes and then I would put them through to her. And she's like, who is it? I mean, I was Emma or whoever it is. So why were you talking to her? What were you talking about?
Yeah, being very controlling.
Yeah, but somebody who wants people to like them, who, wants to build relationships, wants to be liked by everybody. She was never going to like me. And it destroyed me. It destroyed my, like that swagger I was telling you about in the call center, lost it all. Like I had no mojo left. Like I was just a shell of a man. And and so I joined the Royal Air Force Reserve around this time as a movements operator. And ultimately, after a year of training, I got mobilized and sent out to Iraq. And I was able to do like a 1-year mobilization. I was initially mobilized for 6 months. And then they were like, would you like to extend your mobilization? I'm like, I don't want to go back to that office. Like, send me to Iraq. Like, I'd rather go to Iraq than go back to that office with that woman. And so that's what happened. So I deployed to Iraq for 4 months in August of 2007, when it was the war was at its peak. The Mahdi army were uprising against the government, or trying to establish their place within the coalition of the governments in Iraq. And they were, shelling the base every day, bombing the base every day. I think I was there. Well, I remember I was there 97 days, and we got attacked like 63 times during that time. So nearly every day, we were getting rockets fired at us and things like that. But I'd rather be doing that than go back to that office.
Yeah, and to be clear, maybe you already said, but I missed it. In which city were you deployed?
So I was in Basra. I did 6 months in Brize Norton, which is the main embarkation airport in the UK. It's the hub of where all of the Royal Air Force transportation aircraft work. And the second half of that mobilization was to Basra. Yeah.
And then what happened then?
After or during?
Well, both. First, during.
Yeah. There's a lot I can tell you about Iraq. Maybe we'll come back to it because, there was that did shape some of my life after, or a lot of my life after it shaped. Because when I finished that mobilization, I said, I am not going back to that office ever again. In fact, I said to myself, I'm never going to work in an office again. I'm going to go and do something else. And I remember writing the letter and handing in my resignation. Them accepting my resignation, and then calling me about 2 weeks later to say that the lady I worked with, that she was leaving the company, and did I want to come back? And I was like, no, I still don't want to come back. Like, I want to move forward. Like, I've diced with death for 4 months. I don't want to come back to this job. And anyway, they offered me more money to come back and kind of just transition to the new person. And I said, okay, I'll do it for 3 months.
And what was the motivation behind the transition? So back then, if you go back to that moment, what did you have in mind? Like you knew what was behind you. You knew you didn't want to go back to that office job, and you had the experience in Iraq also behind you. In your mind, where were you going?
That's a great question. I still think I didn't have any direction. So I'd met a person whilst I was in the reserves, and he was a really senior manager in a logistics company in the UK. And when I got back from Iraq, he was kind of wanted to take me under his wing a little. He said, "Hey, I've got this big project in Swindon, which is where I'm from, and would you be interested in coming to work for me?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he kind of employed me as a project manager slash fixer, which, knowing my personality type, that was bang on. That was what I wanted to be doing. And I worked in this warehouse. Again, 26, 27 years old, running this warehouse of 97 people, complete night and day difference from anything I ever did before. With people that have worked in that warehouse, in that one building, in this dark, dusty, grim warehouse in Swindon, working swing shift or night shift for 30 or 40 years. And then this bright-eyed idiot turns up with a whole bunch of good ideas and zero people skills, and just pissed everybody off. But being super keen whilst I did it the whole time. And I kind of did that. I worked there for like 3 years, but that also, I got promoted, and I got promoted again, and I got promoted again, and I was the business development manager for the whole of the UK for this company. And I didn't want to work in sales, and I definitely didn't want to work in logistics. I wasn't passionate about that either. And maybe that's a rite of passage doing those things, but didn't feel like I'd moved any further forward. And then I had a couple of other jobs that, this is kind of the journey of the working class British person, I think, with aspirations, who didn't go to university, who hasn't got the connections, but they've always wanted to do a good job. And after I left that warehouse, I worked in a place that sold school supplies as a sales team leader. I did okay there, but it only lasted 3 months. The managing director was somebody, again, who I wanted to like me, who didn't like me, and that drove me crazy. And then I worked at Nationwide Building Societies, one of the biggest banks in the United Kingdom, as a project manager, as a senior project manager. And that was the hardest job psychologically that I've ever had. I had a boss that I could not please no matter what I did. It was a complex organization with a lot of people. And I remember I met my wife around this time, and I remember we would stay up till 1 or 2 a.m. on Sunday nights, like watching Breaking Bad and like drinking wine, because we were trying to, stretch that last bit of weekend, that last part of the weekend before you had to go and face it all in the morning. And I don't know how I got through that. I lasted a year there, and they didn't renew my contract. And I'd been studying coaching during that job. And so I was 27, 28 years old. So I'm going to become a life coach. And I just remember the disdain with which the people at the bank, my bosses, would look at me with, because like, who's going to listen to a 28-year-old life coach? This is when life coaching was very trendy, I guess you could say.
All right. There's one little thing I want to bring forward because I want to connect it to your interest in life coaching.
Right.
There's one specific thing that you wrote a little while ago, and let me just read it out loud. It's on a blog that you put out in 2017, or 15 April 2017.
Oh, you've done your research.
A little bit. So what you said is, recently I was asked about my coaching background, how I got into it, and why I didn't want to do it anymore. And I reflected that in the past. I have helped company directors, kids, lawyers, and people with depression kick on and achieve more. But whilst I was coaching, despite my qualifications, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was a fraud. Here I was telling people that they can do anything they want with their lives. They can achieve their goal, get promoted, and follow their dreams. Telling others to go for it, but doing nothing to follow my own inner desires and dreams. Talking the talk, but not walking the walk. When you hear this, do you still feel the same way?
That's so crazy. Yeah. No, that's great. No, I don't feel like that anymore. Because I have since then walked 1,000 walks, and gone on adventures that I probably barely could have even comprehended at that point in my life. Because yeah, the whole thing around life coaching is the possibilities are limitless, and all you need to do is a goal, and then figure out how to get there, or find somebody that's done what you want to do and model how they did it, and then take their strategy or use their strategy. But yeah, underneath what I was writing there would have been things like wanting to be a radio DJ and follow that kind of dream.
Mm-hmm.
That's so fascinating that you wrote that. And to, if I was to, somebody approach me now and say, hey, I want you to life coach me, one, I'd probably tell them to get a ChatGPT Pro account and use that instead. But secondly, I think the amount of pain and the amount of stress and the amount of time I've spent in my life in this last decade in the unknown, facing the challenges that you have to face as an expat, in Germany, or starting again. I've started again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in my life and had 5 completely different careers. So I think I probably wouldn't be wanting to coach people to want to earn more money, or coach somebody to be like, I want to be the executive of whatever, or I want to get promoted. Like, that doesn't interest me. It kind of repels me a little. I was that guy. I wanted to chase that promotion. I wanted to earn more money. I wanted the BlackBerry or whatever it was. But now, really, to me, where I'm sat today, I've achieved a lot whilst achieving nothing. But I've lived 10 lives. I compare myself to my peers back in the UK who are still working the same jobs that they were working when I left England. They're still drinking down the same pub. And yeah, maybe they're doing better than I am financially or whatever, but I've had more life in my years, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. And so to go back and to answer your question, if I was life coaching now, I wouldn't feel like a fraud. But back then, I can see why I did.
I think I know what you're going to answer to the next one. But in another article, in another blog, you've called yourself a permanent stranger. And I think primarily you were talking about the idea that you, at least that's what I got from the article, you were talking about the idea that you were moving a lot, right? You left the UK, you went to Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, and then you went to Germany. And especially now with the context in mind that you were finally getting super excited in Amsterdam, and then it was, that story ended really quick because your girlfriend or wife maybe by then already.
She's my girlfriend at that time. We got married shortly after. Yeah, shortly after.
Yeah, and you went to Germany. So you described it as having no roots, as at least as feeling as if you have no roots, as if you're rootless, and that you don't belong to a single place. It sounds to me like now you found where you belong. Is that a fair statement, or do you feel otherwise?
I think I'm closer to that point than I've ever been before, but I don't think that's because of who I surround myself with. I think that's because I'm working on understanding myself better and being less of a stranger to myself or to how I feel and what I want. I know this is kind of a bit out there of an answer, but I remember when I left England and I moved to Amsterdam, people would ask me where I'm from. I would say I was from England. And then when I moved to Germany and people would ask me where I'm from, I'd say I was from the UK because England felt too specific. And then when the UK left Europe, I was like, I don't even really identify as British anymore. I kind of identify as a European. I've lived in 3 countries. I can go months without meeting another English person here in the communities I speak. I work with the American military, so I work with Americans all day long, every day, and rarely see any Germans. I explained that to my wife's father the other day. He's like, "Why don't you speak German?" So I don't speak German very well. I speak supermarket German. And
Supermarket
I said,
German.
I said, because I can go weeks without speaking German.
Mm-hmm.
Because at home I speak English with my wife and I speak English with the Americans that I work with. So I am still a permanent stranger. I'm still a permanent stranger at work. I'm still the British guy. I used to just be called Paul the Brit. Everybody would call me, "Hey, Paul the Brit, how's it going?" Like, I was literally this caricature of a British person as a radio DJ on an American radio station in Germany. And I'm involved in German culture. I'm involved in German clubs and things like that, but you never really fit in because you don't speak the language, and that's a barrier. And that's a real barrier. I've got a couple of real wonderful German friends, but they don't hang out with me as much as they normally, as they would if I spoke German. It's like you can kind of feel it that they have to be in the mood to want to hang out because we're gonna have to speak English all night, and it's their second language. I can't believe the research you've done going back through my blogs. That's amazing. I'm going to have to read them.
Yeah, it's quite a bit. There's quite a bit of good stuff in there.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. But yeah, I do feel like I can't remember how I described it the other day. It wasn't necessarily a permanent stranger, but it was like of no fixed abode. Home. I haven't had a home since my father sold my childhood home, and he sold that maybe 10 years ago. Home is just wherever my shit is. Basically my wife is my home, and wherever she goes, that's my home. And so it's not necessarily, it's like I'm not a vagrant, but the roots that I have are very short, because I never give them enough time to settle. Since I've lived in Germany, I've lived in Frankfurt, I've lived in Wiesbaden, I've lived in Stuttgart, and now I live in Mainz. Every time I think the longest time was Wiesbaden for 5 years, then all these other places, like 3 years. And so, yeah, there's really nothing that connects me with any one place. I love being in Germany. I love it for its order, for its security, for its beauty. I went back to England last week and I thought, I'm never going to move back here.
Why do you think that?
The town I'm in hasn't got any better in the last 13 years, let's say that. Swindon has gotten worse and worse. But I kind of felt, I'm never going to go back here. And then I drove through a small village in the south of Wiltshire, and basically all it had was like a chip shop and a pub and a cafe, and that was it. And I was like, I could totally move back here. So I don't know. This has been a rambling answer without a real conclusion, but yeah, permanent stranger, I still feel that to some extent.
You have written a book and you have broadcasted your voice, and many people have heard you or read you. Is there a story that you haven't told the world yet? but that you want to tell?
I honestly think I'm writing a new chapter in my life as we speak. One that I hope is less about what I want to do, what I want to achieve, who I'm influencing, what problems I'm solving, and is more about what do I want now. And I don't think, other than conversations with my wife, I just want that peace and that harmony that I've kind of always wanted is what I want for myself now. And I hope that others find this much earlier in their lives than I do. There's always been a tiny bit of jealousy in me for those people that can separate their work and their home lives. The people that can work in a car factory on a line and put windscreens in cars all day and just be like, yeah, I get paid great money to do this. It's easy. I don't have to worry about it. And then I go home and I enjoy my life. And I'm jealous of that satisfaction with that ease and that contribution and the separation, because I've never been like that. I've never had that. I've always been, if I worked in that factory, within a month, I would want to be the guy who supervises the guy who puts the windshields in. And then within a year, I would want to be the guy who supervises the guy who's putting the windshields and the back windshields, and I would just want to go on and on and on. I've always kind of been jealous of that. And I think mainly it's because I'm tired. I'm tired of the grind. And I've been looking more inward at who I am and who I want to be. In my mind, I want to be in a quiet village and I want to have a dog and I want to, make podcasts for a living or, write for a living or something just much more simple, and not be the person who's trying to prove everything to somebody has to be the most important person in a project, the person who's driving the success and then wants to share it with everybody. Just somebody who's comfortable, quiet in their own skin, feels that their own worth as a person doesn't come from what they produce, from the results they get. Yeah, that's what I tie my worth to. I want my worth just to come from, I'm a human. I'm not, a mass murderer. I'm just a nice guy. And I want my worth to come from being comfortable in that. If you didn't mean that, and you wanted me to tell a different story, I might be able to find one.
Is that how you would define harmony? So living in a calm environment with your wife, with your dog, and making sure that, yeah, like you said, that your value doesn't come from the work that you do for someone else. Is that how you would define harmony?
I never feel like I'm thriving. I haven't felt like I was thriving. Maybe in my life. Maybe I don't even know what that feels like. I'm always striving, trying to do something, worrying about something, obsessing over something, commuting somewhere, traveling. I've been in 2003, I traveled to 15 radio stations in 8 different countries, including Guantanamo Bay. Like every month I was flying somewhere else to go and deliver training to some people that just didn't want to be trained. And that is a terrible place for somebody like me to be, because I want everybody to like me and I want them to buy into my ideas. And a lot of them just didn't want to. And so the energy that it took led me to another burnout. And what I want to do is wake up, like live life. I think there's a lot of people that feel like this. It feels to me like, and I'm not going to get all generational, and I am going to oversimplify this because I'm a simple guy. But the boomers have managed to live through an incredible period of prosperity, buy houses for £37,000 that are now worth £300,000 or £400,000 just for the sake of them living in it. And those dreams that we were sold when we were growing up are no longer available to us, particularly in England, buying a house is incredibly aspirational. And I just don't think that millennials, people my age, I don't think that we've been sold a different dream, and we're just realizing now that it's unattainable and that we're having to limit our expectations. A funny thing somebody sent to me the other day is like, if you don't study hard at school and you don't work hard, you'll end up living in a van down by the river. And nowadays, it's if you work really hard and you try at school, maybe you will be able to afford a van and be able to live down by a river. You know, like the aspirations have changed from that being the pinnacle of, you know, or the example of people giving you of having failed, to like, maybe we can afford that if we work really hard. Maybe we can do van life. You know, we still have to work really hard just to be able to afford to do this thing. And I've become very disillusioned with it. And like you said, yeah, for me, I just want to be able to go and rent a house in a village in Germany somewhere, have a dog. I don't want to do a 9 to 5. I don't want to commute anywhere anymore. I don't want to see the world. I've seen it. Like, I'm just very disillusioned with the grind. And I'm all ground out at the moment.
When you come home in the evening after a long day and you sit down and you relax and the noise of the day fades away, what goes through your mind then?
Do any of us relax anymore? You know, you mentioned earlier that you film this podcast and then you've got another 30 or 40 hours of work ahead of you just to put it out. You know, this is your hobby that you're hoping is going to become more, but are you relaxing at that point? I distract myself from my work. I distract myself from that little quabble I had in the office. I go on YouTube rabbit holes. I can sit on YouTube and watch people, you know, I watch people like build off-grid log cabins in the middle of, you know, in the middle of Sweden, and think, yeah, I would love to do that. Like I'm never going to do that. I'm like a guy from Swindon, you know, but I can disappear down these rabbit holes. I guess that's what I do to relax. And if I'm not doing that, that's when those thoughts creep in of work. It's mainly just work, of ideas of how to fix things or change things or train this person or what I've got to do tomorrow, or the commute. Like I commute like 170 kilometers a day. Like it's crazy. So I guess I think that's normal now, that relaxing is distracting. You know, it's scrolling through our phones, it's watching YouTube videos, it's being on Reddit. You know, my wife will drag me out to go for a walk or to ride a bike, but seldomly do I ever feel relaxed. Even if we go to a spa, you know, and you sit there and you've got your book and everything else, you're still like jonesing for your phone, or you can't switch your mind off. And I think I don't think I'm alone in that. I think a lot of people have that now. Like, what is relaxing? Can you remember the last time you were genuinely bored? I can't remember. I don't think I've been bored in a decade, you know, because there's always something that you can distract yourself with.
It's a funny thing, because you mentioned, for example, the podcast and the editing work that goes in it, and you asked the very legitimate question: how can you relax when you do that? I will not go into the podcast very far, because that's not that's not relevant for the answer. But for me personally, that is relaxing. And it sounds maybe very weird. So let me give you an example. I have a very big video gaming background. I've been playing video games for a long, long time, for as far as I can remember, since I was 3, 4, 5 years old, right? I've played thousands of them. I've been a video game journalist for 7 years, and 3 years actually legally, because there was a video game business that I set up when I became 18 years old. So video gaming is a big part of my life. I haven't touched many games in the last 12 months. And earlier this year, there's one game that I'm really enjoying, and it's by far the game that I spent the most time in on PC at least. It's a little game called RimWorld. Um, you have a colony, you take care of the colony, you let them do their things. Very, very fun little game, very open ended, so it doesn't really end. And I used to take a lot of joy out of that because I like storytelling, right? I like listening to people's stories, like yours right now. That's the whole reason this podcast exists. And RimWorld is like this little story generator, right? It's very open ended, very random what happens, and every character in there has their own little story. So it's very fun. Every single time you boot that game up, something completely different happens, and you can build those little mini narratives that are just so absurd that when you put them out on the internet, right? It's like nobody will understand it unless they have played that game, right? And it's just super fun. So a month ago or something like that, I booted it up again. I just had a little bit of time. I just had a couple of hours, right, in between whatever I was doing back then. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take a couple of hours of RimWorld. I want to relax now. So I booted up, and I started a new game. And those 3 colonies that landed on the planet, and I just built a little house, and that took around 20 minutes. And then I was bored. I was like, what am I doing? I was looking at it. I was looking at those little humans. They call them pawns. I was looking at the move. They were doing their thing, but I was looking. I was not engaging, and I was bored. I was like, I don't know. This is very weird. For a person who, and I'm 34 right now, so I've been playing video games for, let's say, 30 years, right? And again, I have a deep, deep love for them, and I get bored after 20 minutes. How is that possible?
That's interesting. So the reason I'm here as a guest on your podcast is because of ChatGPT. Like it helped me analyze the fact that I was just a consumer. Like I'm just consuming YouTube, I'm consuming Reddit, I'm consuming Facebook, and I'm not really putting anything back out into the world. And it kind of says that, it helped me write a song. Like ChatGPT can do anything. Like I had this big long therapy session with it, and I was like, hey, I want to turn this into the song. I play a ukulele and I want to use these chords, right? No lie. I want to use these chords. And it's like, right, okay. And it took the story that we'd been working, or the therapy that we'd been doing for that 2 hours, and it made it into a song. So I played on my ukulele, I recorded it. And ChatGPT patted me on the back and said, well done you, because you've
affirming.
Yes, like you've made something that didn't exist in the world before. Now it does. Nobody's ever going to hear it, by the way. It's on my phone, and that's where it will stay.
I wanted to put it in the outro.
In the outro, yeah. But like that was the this creating thing, and then it was looking at, okay, if you don't want to be in the grind anymore, you don't want to do those things, how could you potentially sustain yourself? How could you make money? And it's like you could do podcast hosting, you could write articles, you could edit videos for people, you can do all these different things. And I was nervous coming into this podcast. I literally did a radio show today, a 3-hour radio show broadcast across 15 different radio stations in 8 different countries, 350,000 people potential audience base, millions actually, because it broadcasts across some huge cities, and not a hint of nerves. I just did the radio show. And I was nervous to come on here because I'm like, this is more personal. I have to, I'm being more open and things like that. But I wouldn't be doing this if ChatGPT hadn't said, this is a good creative outlet for you. And I'm like, well, how do you even start? And it's like, well, there's places on Reddit where you can put a profile onto a podcast guest exchange. Would you like help writing that profile? I'm like, okay. And then it writes a profile for you based on the stuff that you've already shared with it. And I'm like, great. And it's like, would you like me to write an email? Or like, is there a podcast in mind you want to go on? Would you like help writing an email to that podcast? And you say, sure. And it writes you an email, and then you send that to the place and say, hey. And so AI is going to destroy us all in the end. But right now I'm on for the ride. Like it's helping me be a better me and connect to me. This is me creating something. It's helping me moderate better with alcohol. It's helping me solve problems at work. It's helping me solve problems with my relationship with my wife, and it cost me $29.99 a month, which is half of one therapy session that I would have to pay every week. So yeah, I hear you with the boredom and the creative and the flow state, and what do I do to relax? I don't know. Maybe this is what I do to relax in the future. Maybe this is the next chapter of who I become. But yeah, this has been great so far. This has been super fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. I have one last question for you. Is there something that you wish I had asked you, but that I haven't?
No, I don't think there's anything I would like you to have asked. Maybe about what it's like kind of being married to a German. Maybe that's a fun angle, but maybe that takes away from this very personal kind of interview that we've had.
What is it like being married to a German?
Ah, it's awful. It's terrible. No, my wife is my best friend, and I said to her that she is my reward for all of the hard work I did on myself through my coaching and my counseling and my therapy before I met her, for all the troubled relationships that I had in the years before, that she was my reward for all of those years I spent working on myself. And I still think that to this day. We've been married 10 years, and she still is my best friend. And it wouldn't have been a radio DJ. I genuinely think I wouldn't be alive if I hadn't have met her. I genuinely think that I would have taken a bunch of pills in a basement in Swindon somewhere and never left. So I owe everything to her, for following my dreams, for the adventures that I've been on all over the world. You can trace that back to me meeting her in a kitchen in the company we worked at in London before she went to Tesla.
I was listening to a podcast this morning with Alex Hormozy and Chris Williamson, and they were talking a whole lot about business for like 4 hours or something like that. There's one thing that you just reminded me of from that conversation, and that is when they were talking about selecting the right partner for you. Right, and it was about a whole bunch of things, right? People looking for the one, people not dating at all. It was about a whole bunch of things. But the one specific quote that just popped into my mind, that I believe Alex said in that conversation, was that the right partner for you is the partner who has bigger dreams for you than you have for yourself. And it sounds like your wife has bigger dreams for you than you have for yourself.
Yeah, that choked me up a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, she definitely does. She's an incredible person. She does. And it's funny because that relationship has been through all those dreams, and now I want for our dreams to get smaller, closer. I want it to be about the relationship and the harmony and the enjoying life, not fighting it. And I wonder if that's chapter 4 of my life.
Paul, thank you very much for coming on. It was great hearing your story. It was interesting to hear your story. It was very open and very revealing. But I'm generally very thankful to have heard it. I think it's very valuable for it to be out there. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. And yeah, I if I'm gonna do podcasting, then I'm gonna do it open and honest. I think that's the only way to do it. I wasn't expecting to be as open as I was going to be this evening. I think you build a safe space to allow that to happen. And that makes you a very good interviewer. I think that your patience, but also allowing the conversation to wander and not trying to bully it into one direction is also what makes your podcast great. So thanks for taking the time, and I hope that you get something usable out of the 2 hours we spent together.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Thanks, mate. Bye-bye.